Ladies and gentlemen, folks, welcome to Monday Night Nerd. I'm so glad you could all tune in tonight on this new time, 8 o'clock. It has been a great day. It's been a great weekend, and I hope you have also had a great week and a great weekend. Folks, if you are new here, my name is Myers Corp Cosplay. I've been a cosplayer for 10 years off and on, few years recently. I've been really going into it. I've been a nerd since birth, and this is my show where we talk about nerdy things. We talk about cosplay. We talk about movies. We talk about music. We talk about comics. We talk about everything else. And tonight we're going to be talking about the great George Carlin. You might be saying, is that nerdy? Well, yeah, to me it is nerdy because he was an amazing comedian. And guys, it's my show. I can talk about what I want. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of other things. We're going to start off with a little bit of news. Some things have been going on. But first, tonight, I got to admit, this is one of my favorite t-shirts right now. My Video and Arcade Top 10 from our buddies at Retro Kid. If you are a nerdy fan like I am, check out Retro Kid. This is not a sponsorship. I'm just a really, really big fan of their products. They're at Fan Expo every single year. And I've been eyeballing this shirt for so long. And I finally was able to pick it up last year. And I love this. I love Video and Arcade Top 10 when I was a kid. I love a lot of the stuff they have. They've got a Na Na Land stuff coming up. They've got Mr. Dress Up stuff. They've got reboot stuff. Check them out, Retro Kid. And again, not a paid sponsorship. I'm just a big fan of their stuff. Let's jump into the news quickly. We got a couple things to talk about. I got a couple movie reviews. One of the movie, and these are not new reviews, folks. These are reviews of old movies. I've not really had much time to do any new movie watching. Everyone's been telling me I need to watch Dune 2. Folks, I've not seen Dune 1. I know I need to watch these. I know they're great epic movies, but I've not watched them yet. Everyone was asking if I've seen Dune 2. I've not. I've seen the popcorn bucket all over social media, but I've not seen the movie. But one of these days, I will end up watching it because the cast is amazing. Everything looks great about these movies, but it's not tonight. We're going to talk about some old movies because that's what I've watched recently. I've kind of wanted to go through a bit of a nostalgia kick. And one of the movies that I loved growing up, and I was so happy to meet one of the cast members at Niagara Falls Comic-Con a few years ago. This movie really brought me and my dad together. My dad is a very big NASCAR fan. He used to drive cars when I was younger. My sister drove cars when I was a little older. He's a NASCAR guy. And we really bonded on the movie Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise. I've seen this movie so many times. I can almost recite it line for line. And I just wanted a nostalgia night. So I threw this movie on, and I got to admit, it is still an incredible movie for me. I understand a lot of people don't like it if you're not a big NASCAR fan, but for me, it holds a very special place in my heart. And something I didn't realize until now, I realized the cast in this movie is great, but I really didn't realize, I got a hair in my face. I really didn't realize how great this cast is until this viewing. So this is a movie, obviously, about NASCAR. It's got Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman starring in it. And it's about Tom Cruise being a rookie driver, and they actually show a lot of NASCAR races in it. They show a lot of drivers. Richard Petty's in it. Darrell Waltrip, I believe, is in it. It's a great, great movie. But the cast, you've got Tom Cruise, like I said. You've got Nicole Kidman, like I've asked. His crew chief is Robert Duvall. The owner of the race team is Randy Quaid. The rival driver is Michael Rooker. One of the crew members is John C. Reilly. One of the other rival drivers is Carrie Ewells from Princess Bride and Robin Hood Men in Tights. And then you've got Fred Thompson, who was in Die Hard 2 as sort of the chief of NASCAR. It's a stacked roster on this movie that I never really realized. I knew Tom and Robert Duvall and Nicole Kidman, but the whole cast is really, really good in this movie. And I got to meet Michael Rooker. I've met him a couple times, but I met him and actually had a chance to talk to him a few years ago at Niagara Falls Comic-Con. He was a guest, and he's always signing Guardians of the Galaxy stuff because that's what he's known for now. But I walked up and I said, dude, I love you in all your roles. I love you in Henry and everything else. But man, Days of Thunder, you are such a great actor in that movie, and it really brought me and my dad together. And he was really sentimental about it. He said he loved his time on the movie. He had a great time. He was so happy to be in it because him and his dad, I believe, were NASCAR fans too. So there was a little bit of bonding there. So he really had a cool moment just saying, thank you for that. So watch this movie. It's a great movie. If you're a NASCAR fan, go check it out. It's from 1990, but it's still a great movie. It's shot really well. I always say it's the Top Gun of NASCAR movies. If you like Top Gun, it's kind of beat for beat like Top Gun, but I love it personally. The other movie I watched is another movie that I love, and a great, great friend of mine, Lynn, who is actually friends with I met through my dad. We always have this joke about this movie because there's a special day in this movie that we always message each other and tell each other we can't be upset today because today is Rex Manning Day, and that is the movie Empire Records. I love this movie. I haven't seen as much as Days of Thunder, but I've seen it so many times, and this was another movie that I wanted to watch for my nostalgia night, and boy, is it a great movie. It's not as big of a cast as Days of Thunder, but it's still a great movie. All about a record shop an independent record shop that's gonna become this big corporate world, and all the people in there are very different personalities, and they all try and get along and try and buy the store back. It's a great movie. It's a really funny movie from multiple points. If you've ever worked in a music store, you'll understand it. But I like it even more now because I've worked with celebrities at these Comic-Cons all the time. And seeing someone like a Rex Manning, who is the heartthrob singer of the movie, show up and be treated as a celebrity, it's so accurate to what I've seen. Not everything in the movie. There are parts in it that I've never seen anything physical happening with the celebrity, but it is so accurate of that celebrity coming in and having, certain people come up and saying, you were my favorite when I was a kid. And then the guy saying, well, who's your favorite now? Oh, you're still my favorite. So little comments like that, it really makes me laugh because I've seen that so many times with celebrities at these Comic-Cons. So yeah, Empire Records, it's one of my favorite movies. Go check it out. If you're a music fan, it's a killer soundtrack too. Killer soundtrack, great cast, great 90s, problems and stuff that as a 90s kid, I've seen these things with other people, and it's a great movie. I can't say anything bad about it. I know it's not the greatest movie in the world, but personally, I like it. Let's talk quickly about wrestling. If you're a wrestling fan, a couple nights ago, it was AEW Revolution, and it was Sting's last match. And I'm sorry, my nose is super itchy all of a sudden. It's that Coke problem I have. Don't do Coke. Sting's last match was last Saturday, and it was a great send-off for Sting. I don't want to spoil it, but him and his tag team partner Darby Allin did a tag team match with the Young Bucks. They left everything in the ring. Personally, I've seen enough highlights of the match. I have to admit, I felt like they took it too far. There is a spot that Darby Allin does where he sets up a ladder in the ring and jumps through a pane of glass on the outside. And most of the time, this is done with things like sugar glass, but you can tell after he goes through it, his back is wrecked. It is bleeding heavily, and you can tell it is real glass. There is an angle from, looks like up in the stands looking down, and you can see when he hits, the glass kind of goes everywhere. It's right down the walkway, and glass goes into the crowd. I got to admit, if I was in that crowd in that seat and I got covered in glass, they'd be hearing from somebody, and I know suing people is not the greatest thing, but I'm thinking, dude, if I had a kid and he was sitting in that corner and he got covered in glass, like, that's something you can't do. I've been a wrestling fan for a long time, and I grew up with the Attitude Era and ECW and all that stuff. I don't think it's needed anymore. I think it's really out of place. It really bugs me now when I see that stuff. I feel like you can do so much more now, and that's not necessary. I felt like they took it too far personally. I think Sting took a glass spot too. Thankfully he had a shirt on, but it was too much for me. I'm glad he's done. I'm glad he's retired. If you are in the Buffalo area this summer, Canada Day weekend, Nickel City Comic Con just in Buffalo, he will be there. I can't wait to meet him again. I've met him once before. I can't wait to see him and just say thank you for a great career. But I'm kind of glad he's done. I'm glad he's retired, and I hope there won't be any more spots like that because, yeah, that glass spot really took me out of the match from the highlights I saw. I would not be happy if I was in that corner and I got covered in glass. There was definitely, if you watch the replay, there is a woman in pink, and she is just wiping glass pieces off her shirt, and I'm like, you can't do that. Like, it's not an indie show where there's 50 people around the ring. Like, this is a packed house. Again, if there was a little kid there, I could just imagine what parents would be doing. They would be suing AEW left, right, and center for that. So, my opinion, people have theirs. That's how I feel about it. But overall, great match, and it seemed like that was the highlight. Let's talk about cosplay. So we are within 2 weeks of Toronto Comic Con. I haven't posted anything about it because it's still 2 weeks away. I don't want to post anything way too early. I will just be there on the Sunday. I have my premium pass from last year, so I will be able to get in. I'm able to get in one day, except for Saturday. So I will be there. I could be there either Friday or Sunday. Friday, I have to work. I'm sorry. I can't do a whole day. Like, I can't do a full day off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be doing Sunday, and I don't know what to do. I've got so many cosplays. This is the fun of being a cosplayer. I announced 3 cosplays at the beginning of the year. I announced Princess Kenny, I announced Ultron, and I announced Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad. I've not worked on Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad. I've barely worked on Ultron, and I've sort of worked on Kenny. However, I've also added 3 other cosplays to the lineup for this year, and I've worked heavily on those. What I've worked on so far, if you've not followed me on Instagram, I have printed a Court of Owls mask. This was 3D printed off a file I found on Thinkiverse. So my first thought was to do a Court of Owls cosplay because that I could just do the mask and I could do a nice suit and that would be it. But then I thought it doesn't really do much. It's a mask and a suit. So I also have created a 3D print owl skull, which I will be putting on top of a cane. The cane is outside in my garage right now drying because I just painted it. So that is one cosplay that I could do. I have also randomly decided I should do Hush from Batman as well. I've always been a fan of the character. This is a character I wanted to do since I started cosplaying back in like 2010, 11, but I never knew how to do it. Now that I've got the skills, I have been able to do it, and I have created the mask for Hush. It is bandages covered in a foam. I think it's a Captain America pattern that I used. So this is option 2. I have a trench coat here. The only thing is with this is I would have to do a lot more work in the interior because Hush has sort of like a snowsuit style interior with a bunch of pouches and stuff. So there is more work to be done on that. It is still a possibility. I could easily get it done by the end of the week. The third is I could bring out Weird Al Yankovic for the first time. I just got my white and nerdy hoodie made by my good friend Megan. I have a red do-rag finally, so I could do that. And I've also have made a platinum chain, and I'm going to have a Pokeball as the emblem on there. And I could wear my Green Lantern rings and all my colored lantern rings as my rings. So that's another option. So, and plus I've also got, you can't see it, but I've got Vic Rattlehead from Megadeth up there. I've got Ghost Rider. This is the problem now is I have so many options for cosplaying. I've even also considered bringing Gambit back because it's going to be a bunch of the X-Men 97 people there. So I don't know what the hell I'm going to do for Sunday, but I'm definitely going to be working on a couple things and just seeing how far I get on each one. I'll make a decision at the last minute. I'll post something probably next week, probably Tuesday. Not that I think everyone's sitting around wondering what I'm going to do, but I will make a decision by then, and then we can all figure out on Sunday what we're going to do and what I'm going to be walking around in, because I still don't know. Speaking of next week, though, and speaking of Toronto Comic Con, next week on the show, we're going to have two special guests, and they are two returning special guests, and that is Mr. Messiah Complex Cosplay and JS from the Geeks & Co. squad. They will be here, and we're going to be talking about con crunching, because we will be within 1 week of Toronto Comic Con, and it is getting that close to crunch time. We're going to be talking about crunching, how to get your cosplays done in time, what to do, but we're also going to be talking a little bit about time management, because along with, they have a podcast, the Geeks & Co. Geek Boutique podcast, once a week, Thursday, 7 o'clock. They're also cosplayers, but they also have families and kids and friends and all that other stuff. So we're going to talk about time management and how to make all these things work properly, because there was really, and I'm going to bring up a lot about how I feel about this, because up until recently, I've kind of had the same viewpoint of, I feel like I'm working to a date of going to a con. And I realize with things like social media and such, that's not a thing anymore. I don't have to work towards a date to debut a cosplay. I could just finish a cosplay, take some photos, and throw them online, and you guys will all see it. So we're going to talk about that, because I think that's still in a lot of people's heads, that they have to get things done by a con. Folks, just because you put your name on a con and say you're going to have something done, doesn't mean you can't miss it. It's not the end of the world if you do. So we're going to talk all about that next week, the Geeks & Co. folks. And one other thing, as I've mentioned before, in about a month and a half, I'm going to be away. I'm going to go on vacation. And unfortunately, I'm going to be so far away and the internet's terrible, I will not be able to do the show live. However, we already have the first of 2 episodes pre-taped. There will be a guest, and we have a really, really fun show. It is probably one of the most fun shows I've had. We're definitely going to be doing more of these. I don't want to spoil what it is, but definitely I will be announcing that in the next couple weeks. So we got a lot of fun stuff coming up. That's it for the news. Not much else has been going on right now. Let's talk about a sponsor, then we're going to jump into George Carlin. Sponsor, as always, if you're new here, folks, the sponsor every week is my beautiful, lovely wife. Because honestly, without her, I would not have this. I would not be doing any of this. I would not have all this. I would not have an amazing house. I would not have an amazing friends. I would not have an amazing family. Honestly, she's changed me for the better, and it means the world to me that she is with me. We've been together for over a decade, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. I love you, hun. Thank you for everything. You are my rock, and yeah, I'm going to be I'm sucky. I don't care. Get used to it. For those who are still here, if you could please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, all those fun things. It really means the world to me. It shows that you guys like this show and that you want more stuff like this. It also tells me that you like this time. I want to know if you guys like 8 o'clock. Like I said before, we've bumped it to 8 o'clock. We're going to keep it going for the next little while, because it's easier for me. I think a lot of people do stuff from 7 to 8. And I feel like this is a better time because everyone's ready to just relax and get into the night. So if you guys dig it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit all that stuff. It means so much to me. I also see that Twitch is working. So if you're on Twitch, this show from now on will be on Twitch live. You can't see it in the schedule for some reason. I don't know why it doesn't do that. But right now I can see that it is live on Twitch. Myers Corp Cosplay, same user URL as everything else. So if you want to watch it on Twitch, you can check it out there. Let's talk about Mr. George Carlin. Let's talk about George Carlin. I have been a George Carlin fan. It feels like since birth. I know it wasn't, but it feels like it. If you don't know who George Carlin is, hi, welcome from under the rock. Like, I think you all probably know who George Carlin is, but George Carlin is an incredible, incredible comedian. I'm going to give you a little history on him. He was born in 1937 in New York City. Born into an Irish family, went to a Catholic parish school in New York. Realized after a certain age that the whole Catholic upbringing and stuff wasn't for him. He had a lot of questions about it. Really changed the way he thought about things, but he wanted to make it in the world of, radio and stand up and all that stuff. So he really kept a very clean image, a very suit and tie back in the day, not the counterculture like everyone knows him for. He started in a very straight duo with a guy named Jack Burns in about 59, 60. He, again, very straight-laced, no cursing, nothing like that. Tried it for about a decade and realized that this wasn't who he was. It wasn't. He mentions in one of his specials that the person that you saw on stage was a cardboard cutout, and he does this part of the act with a cardboard cutout of him where he says, "This is how I felt. I didn't feel like I was in my act. I felt like this was just someone I was showing." And then around 1970 was when George became the George we all know today, where very counterculture, very against the grain, was very good at calling out BS on a lot of things in the world. Really turned the way a lot of people saw politics, the world, culture, language, on a whole bunch of other things. I first was introduced to George not through the albums, not through the comedy specials. I grew up watching George on Shining Time Station. Going back to retro, if you grew up as a kid in the 90s and you watched PBS, there was a show called Shining Time Station, and Shining Time Station showed Thomas the Tank Engine. And they would show clips from the UK version of Thomas the Tank Engine, and in between there was a segment called Shining Time Station, which showed actors in a train station, and they would have little discussions. There were kids on the show, there were adults, and there was a character who introduced the episodes and would narrate the episodes. He was known as Mr. Conductor, and he was a little version, and he would sit there and talk to the kids and the adults about Thomas and the Shining Time Station and all that stuff. Well, that was played by George Carlin. And when I was a kid, I didn't know who George Carlin was because I was so small. But it wasn't until later that I realized, oh, I grew up with this guy. And also, after George left and he was replaced by Ringo Starr. So the humor of going from somebody who would influence me in my humor-wise and the way I looked at the world to a drummer who was one of the most famous drummers ever is hilarious. This show also had someone who, if you're a Grease fan, you'll know, Didi Khan, who played Frenchie in Grease, was also in this show. It was a stacked cast when you really think about it. But that's where I met George for the first time, and he was really good as an actor, but after that, it kind of went quiet. I didn't really know much about him until I was probably around age 12, I would say, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger. And my mom had this album, and it was literally an album, a vinyl album called Class Clown. And if you've ever seen anything from George Carlin or people talking about George Carlin, you know that this album really shaped how a lot of people grew up with George and found the humor in George. This was an album that I could quote this from beginning to end. It really, it's hard to explain without listening to it. I wish I could just play it and go, this is why I love this part. This is why I love this part. The album is such an interesting layout. It is very much about jokes about being a class clown and things to do it as a class clown, talking about, Hawaiian nose humming and stuff like that, and artificial fart under the arms and stuff like that. And it was really funny as a kid that there's someone on an album that your parents had making fun of all the things that you find funny. But at a certain point, that stops. And he starts talking about Muhammad Ali and how he didn't want to fight in Vietnam and how the US government wouldn't let him box if he didn't go to Vietnam. And it's those things that make that album so much more than what you would normally think it is. Because when you're a kid, you laugh at the jokes about the farting and being a class clown. But once you hit a certain age, the Muhammad Ali part makes more sense. And you start to think about the irony of he's a boxer. The government won't let him beat the crap out of people if he doesn't go across the world and kill people. Stuff like that really is what got me hooked on George and really made me think about the world and really think about what people in certain positions of power wanted, and to really think about things and think about the underlying message and not just think about what's coming out at you straight ahead. And of course, it ends with the most famous thing that George ever did, the 7 words you cannot say on television, which I am also not going to say here on YouTube because, well, it's YouTube and I don't want to get flagged, and I put this stuff on Spotify and I don't want to get flagged on there for inappropriate words. So go check it out on YouTube after the show's over to see the 7 words. But if you're a George fan, you probably already know them by heart because if you've seen it once, it kind of gets stuck in your head like an earworm. But yeah, I played that album to death. I'm surprised. My mom still has it, and I'm surprised it still works because I played it on album so many times. And then when CDs came out, we got the CD, and I played that to death too. But that was really where I started to get a love of George. And with anything, and you might notice this from these types of episodes, when I like something, I want to know everything. My wife doesn't understand that. She's very, she wants to know a little bit about it. She might not deep dive into it. I want to know everything. When I became a Metallica fan, I wanted to know every member, where they grew up, when they started, what's their favorite song, what's their favorite album, what writing credits do they have. I want to know everything. So when I first started to really get into George, when I was just about a teenager, I wanted to watch everything. And I had the benefit of having a local video store within 3-4 blocks of my house. And they had several of his stand-up specials on VHS. And I would rent them all the time. I enjoyed them. I loved every one of them. But there was also another reason for it. And that was my mom and I really bonded watching George. It was one of the few things my mom and I would watch together that we would both be laughing hysterically about. We love stand-up comedy. We love things like Mr. Bean and America's Funniest Home Videos and stuff like that. But this felt like it was hers, obviously, because she gave me the album for the first time. But me renting the videos, it almost felt like me giving it a little bit back. Like, thanks for that little taste. Here, I want to give you some of this funny too. And being a kid at 13, 12, 14, my humor was not her humor, but we had this thing in common. So that was really bonding for us. I really enjoyed sitting down watching, the Jammin' from New York special, the Back in Town special. There was at least 4 or 5 that we would just rent over and over and over again. To the point where I think the video store kind of knew when they were available. I would go in there and they'd be like, they're there if you want to rent them, or if they're not in, don't worry, find something else. But just like everything else, I could almost recite pretty much his 90 to about 2002, all of his specials almost word for word, because I have all the albums, I have all the DVDs now. And like I said, it really shaped my sense of humor, his dry humor, his questioning authority. I'm getting to that, Mom. I'm getting to that. Mom's in chat on YouTube. Yes, I'm getting to that. Give me time. Give me time. But it was really the questioning of authority, and that might also be wrestling because I was a big Steve Austin fan, so questioning the boss at that point too. But the mindlessly agreeing with things, there's different parts of the specials. The saving the planet is one that I'll always quote because it's such I remember having that pushed down my throat in grade school of, we're going to save the planet. We're going to save the whales and save the bees and all that stuff. And George points out, the world's been around for billions of years. The world's not going anywhere. We are. And it always made me laugh where I'm like, yeah, that's the true part. We're not saving the planet. We're trying to save ourselves. So it was little things like that on the specials that really made me question the words that people would use. And, if we want to push language, especially now, it is, we'll talk more about this later of what George would be like in 2024, but the way language is used now and certain things that have changed, especially since, the Bill Cosby and the Me Too movement and all that, which is all great, but I can definitely see where some people can push things way farther than they have to be. George makes a joke about, are we going to get to the point where we call a manhole cover a personhole cover? And not saying that's ever going to happen, but how far do if we're able to push it this far, what's saying we don't push it that far? So his personality and his humor just really seeped into me. I was at that age where I was a sponge, and it was such a great thing to see. Not only just the stand-up specials, the books too. I'm not a reader. Besides comics, I'm not really a reader. I will do audiobooks, and one of the first audiobooks that I ever listened to was George Carlin. I tried reading it, but it just didn't do it for me. Again, for some reason, reading's not my thing, but I would listen to his books. They were basically glorified stand-up specials, but he had books like Brain Droppings, Napalm and Silly Putty, and one of the funniest book titles I've ever read, When Will Jesus Bring the Pork Chops? Like, it was so funny just to be sitting there and going, this is an audiobook. And folks, this was a funny audiobook, which I loved, but I want to point out, this is not the days of Audible. And this wasn't broken up like, there was no app or anything like this back in the day. The digital version of these would be like music tracks that you'd have to download, and it would be like one book would be 40 tracks. So if you're a music fan and you have an audiobook, it's really hard to be like, I want to listen to this book. And if you listen to music, you have to kind of jump back and forth. It was such a pain in the butt. It's so much easier now with things like Audible and Spotify and stuff like that. But yeah, it was so good listening to those too, because again, they were glorified audio, they're glorified stand-up specials. There was a lot of overlap, but he also added other things to it. If you've never heard them and you think they're just books for books, no, go listen to them. They're some of his highlights of all of his career. But yeah, an incredible comedian. And I got the benefit, as my mom pointed out, we got to see him twice. And I still am sort of like, I saw George Carlin twice. Saw him in 2002 and saw him in 2004. I still have the ticket stub behind me in my whatever you call that, my frame. Figured there'd be a better word for it, but I guess there isn't. He was in the middle of building his 2005 special, Life is Worth Losing. He was working on that for those two shows. They were a little bit of similar, if I remember correctly. Funny story, if you've ever seen his special Life is Worth Losing, he's a little off during the performance. I noticed it many years ago when I first saw it. He just seemed a little off, and I know he only had about two specials before he passed away. So I thought he was just, he was getting that time. But funny enough, you found out later he's actually going through heart failure during the special. Once he got off stage, they rushed him to the hospital, and they had to do a lot on his heart to get him fixed. But they still showed the special. It's crazy now that was happening. And it's funny because I'm also a big Kevin Smith fan. And if you're a Kevin Smith fan, you know that he shot an HBO special, Silent But Deadly, and he had a heart attack right after the special. And we'll get into it in a little bit, but George Carlin was in a couple Kevin Smith movies. So the irony of those two having similar outcomes because of a special is pretty ironic. But yeah, it was a great time. I remember my face hurting, and that was the first time I remember leaving a comedy special where my face hurt. And to be fair, every comedy special I've been to, my face has hurt. I've seen Billy Connolly. That was incredible. The Blue Man Group was incredible. Jeff Dunham was incredible. All of them were great, but this was the first one where I literally was walking out holding my face because my jaw was in the Joker grin for almost 2 hours, it felt like. This was one of the first times, if you've ever seen that special, this is one of the first times he was showing off the modern man speech where he goes through, he's a modern man, I'm a low fly, hope, and that was incredible to see him do a section like this where he's just naming things, and just on the ball on everyone. And I remember reading and watching things later where he talked about how he didn't go up and ever improv it. He had a 9-to-5 job, and that 9-to-5 job was sitting behind a computer and typing everything out. He would type out his entire special, and he would memorize it word for word. And that is something that I don't think a lot of people realize of. He was so counterculture, but he really had a 9-to-5 job. His 9-to-5 job, though, was comedy. And that's just not something that I think a lot of people appreciate. And I think as an artist, I think a lot of people think that things just happen and you can improv things. I did it when I first started the show where I thought, I'm just going to come on here and I'm just going to blab on for an hour and that's going to be a show. But it wasn't until a couple episodes in where I realized, no, I have to do work. I have to get notes. I have to understand these things. And it's very different to, I think, what a lot of comedians at that time were trying to do. They had bullet points, but he just wrote everything out. So seeing that live really made me go like, wow, this guy knows his stuff and can just pull it out of his butt when he needs it. I will admit, I had been such a fan of his 90s stuff and even some of his late 80s stuff. He really, I could tell there was a little more anger in this special than what it was before. Obviously, this is after things like September 11th, which we will get into. But it just seemed more angry, which kind of took me, it kind of took me back a little bit. He was obviously getting older. He sadly isn't around for much longer. Well, a few more years after this. But yeah, I think after, I don't want to say after, the terrorist attacks and stuff like that, but I think he was getting tired of it. Like it really felt like his last couple specials, there was a lot of anger. And I don't know if it was anger towards a specific person. I think it was just anger in general. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. George Carlin was the first thing I really torrented. Sorry, when things like LimeWire and stuff were popular, I remember downloading everything that he had. That was one of the first torrents that I remember getting gigabytes worth of stuff. I think at the time we had a certain limit at my mom's house. This was not the days of unlimited internet like you do now. It's, you had a certain bandwidth you can run. And I remember checking it and going, yeah, I'm getting really close to running through the entire month with one torrent. But it was so cool having every bit of content at your fingertips. This was obviously before Netflix and all that stuff. Even YouTube wasn't a thing back then. So it was really cool to have all of his stuff at my fingertips. And I just physically downloaded every bit into my head because I'm just such a fan. What else? Let me check my notes here. So let's talk about him being angry. This, like I said, when I saw him live, it was great. But like I said, I think he was a little more angry than I expected. And I definitely do think the things like the terrorist attacks of 9/11 and stuff played a factor. And if you're not a big Carlin fan like I am, he actually recorded a special on September 9th and September 10th of 2001 in Vegas. And it was coincidentally entitled, "I Kind of Like It When a Lot of People Die." And it is a very interesting special. I've heard it once because it was obviously when everything happened, they canceled the special, and it's only been released, I think, for the past 6 or 7 years. It was definitely brought out. They found some recordings in his archives of the shows, and it's gone out humanously post his death, post his passing. And he explains in the special, he likes big. I'm reading off my notes, so I make sure to get it right. He likes big fatal disasters with lots of dead people. What's the best thing I can hear on television? We interrupt this program. You know what the worst thing you can hear? No one was hurt. I'm always rooting for a really high death toll. That's why I like natural disasters. And again, this was recorded on September 9th and September 10th of 2001 in Vegas. So, because of everything that happened on September 11th, 2001, they had to cancel the special, and he realizes that was not appropriate to come out. And yeah, I don't know if he never wanted it to see the light of day, but yeah, it's out now. You can check it out on YouTube. You can buy the CD. They've actually released it. There are some interviews on there, but that entire special is on there, and it's a little haunting to hear him talk about all those things when within 24 to 48 hours, you are going to have one of the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil in the history. And still, nothing's happened like that again. So it's kind of crazy to think that happened and that happened. For those who don't know who George Carlin is, you've probably run into him if you're a film fan, if you're a nerd like me. Things like Shining Time Station when I was a kid. Like I mentioned before, great directors like Kevin Smith. He directed him in Dogma as Cardinal Glick, talking about the Buddy Christ. One of my favorite roles. It fits him so well. He plays it. He plays it perfectly. Because he grew up with the Catholic upbringing. It worked. God, my nose is super itchy tonight. He's perfect. The Catholic upbringing helps him so much in the role. Kevin's Catholic upbringing as well works so well in this role. Jay and Silent Bob strike back as well. He makes a cameo in that. As Alex says in chat, obviously Bill and Ted, as Rufus. He is also in the newest one, I believe. I've not seen the newest one, but I believe he is in that too. They show archival footage. And if you're a kid or you have kids, you've probably seen him or at least heard his voice. He is in the movie Cars as Fillmore the van, which made me laugh out loud when I saw that for the first time. It fits him so perfectly to be the stoner van. Yeah. So unfortunately, again, I'm sorry. My nose is stupid itchy tonight. It's that cold's coming back. Unfortunately, we lost George June 22nd, 2008 at 71 from heart failure. He had 3 heart attacks beforehand. He had had one in 78, 82, and 91. I think the year that he passed away, if not the year before, he had been in the hospital many times for heart problems. Family history from what has been reported. It's sad. He was only 71, but I think also with the way the world had changed so much in the past 6 years because of 9/11 and all that stuff. Like I said, I think he was so angry at the world. I think he was a little happy that he didn't have to do it anymore. Nowadays you see a lot of people posting his videos on TikTok and YouTube, and a lot of kids coming out talking about what he would be like in today's world. What would he say about today's world? It's weird because I never met George. I'm just looking at it as a fan and what I've seen from interviews and etc. I think he'd be very tired because I think a lot of people on both sides of every argument, from top, I could list like every political, moral, every argument. I think you could put George on either side because he was very old fashioned, but he also understood that times change. And things are always going to evolve. Whether you sit here and argue it or not, it's going to change. I don't think he would be angry. I think he'd be very disappointed in how, I got to choose my words properly here because I don't want to offend anybody, because I really don't want to. I just want to make sure I say it properly. I think he'd be disappointed in us not being able to come together. I think we become so divided, and everything you have to pick one side or the other in every single argument. And I feel like he'd be very disappointed that none of us, or very, very few of us, can come to a common agreement on a lot of things. And that's frustrating. I think, like I said, I think every argument would want him on either side. And I feel like he would be pulled in so many different directions. And I think he would be very tired. I think with certain celebrity politicians getting elected, I think that might have been his time to tap out and say, I can't do this comedy stuff anymore. I think that really would have broke him. Maybe broke him's not the right term, but I think that would have stopped him and just been like, dude, I can't make fun of this. Like, we've gotten this far. And it really makes me laugh thinking about that. And you guys, everybody has their opinion on it. I'm not going to talk about my political thoughts. But I do laugh that George's one line that I will always remember it, and not just because of this, but because it's just a funny line. He always says, I love people. I love individuals. I don't like groups, because groups, they get hats. And based off certain people who wear red hats now with certain text on it, I feel like that's a very appropriate statement. I don't know. I really don't think he'd be doing I think he would be what, maybe in his 90s now almost, maybe in his late 80s. But I don't think he would be. No, he'd be in his 90s now. I don't think he'd be doing what he does anymore. I really think he would have retired fairly soon after he passed away. I think he would have been done fairly quickly. But yeah, that he was an inspiration to me. If you've never seen George Carlin and you're watching this, just go watch his stand-up specials. All of them are amazing. Even his early stuff. I think because the 90s and 2000s stuff becomes so political and so counterculture, I feel like that stuff gets the spotlight. But even if you go back, and even his straight stuff back when he was a straight comedian, there are some gems in those specials. I am really becoming a fan. I didn't really understand until later that the AM FM version or AM FM album is one of my favorites now, because the AM version is the clean version and the FM version is the counterculture version of George. And hearing that the AM version does have its, I'm getting to that. Mom, this is how you know it's my mom, because she's thinking the same way I am. Getting to things like, my mom says, the Hippy Dippy Weatherman was one of his straight specials, and that is just as funny as some of his counterculture and his 7 words you can't say on television. I will try and do the Hippy Dippy Weatherman as best I can. I don't want to butcher it. If you haven't seen it, go check it out on social media. It's one of the better ones. Yes, and also the Indian Sergeant. That is also another good one. The Hippy Dippy Weatherman of, see, now I'm on the spot. I can't do it. The Que Pasa? What you call your pasta? Al Sleep here, the Hippy Dippy Weatherman, with all your hippy dippy weather, man. Brought to you by Parsons Pest Control. Do you have water bugs and roaches? We'll get rid of the water bugs and smoke the roaches. Yay! Tonight's forecast, dark, turning to partly light in the morning. Like, stuff like that is just, it's comedy gold. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be, making fun of politicians or the world. It's just little funny things like that of, just the world and things in the world that you just don't think about until George brings it up. And I think that's what brought me my sense of humor, and brought many people the love that they have for George. Is they really open themselves up to, the way the world is, and, getting that sheen version of the world from the news and from friends and family. And George is there just to wipe that sheen off and go, no. This is what the real world is like. Don't forget it, because that's a fake version, and you will not enjoy life as much as if you see this clean version, or see this more real version and not the shiny version. But yeah, I miss him, but I feel like if, a lot of people say it'd be great. Like I said, I think a lot of people would wish he was still here in today's climate of the world. And I don't, I think a lot of bands and a lot of people try and outstay their welcome and get to the point where it's not, they just shouldn't be doing it anymore. And I think George sadly passed away right around the time that he should have ended his comedy. Like I said, the anger just kind of takes over a little bit. And I think that was a perfect time to say goodbye. It'd be great if he got to enjoy life post comedy, but yeah, it's sad, but we have a lot of things to watch still and enjoy. He had like 20 comedy specials. He was one of the few comics that did one comedy special a year. Like, not many, if any, do that. Like, if you're a comedian, if you see any comedians, there are guys out there that are working on jokes that they've been using for years. George had a new set every single year. Like, that's an hour a year that you got to make hilarious. That man worked his butt off, and he deserves to be one of the best. And he is one of the best, and he gets all his flowers, and he deserves every single bit of them. So that was George. That was my fandom of George. I like I said, I listen to him all the time, and if you haven't, you should, because he was a great comedian. Next week we are going to be back. We're going to be talking with the Geeks and Co. folks. We're going to talk about cosplay, con crunching. Oh, before I do this, if you're still here, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It means so much to me. Thank you all who've been in the chat commenting. It means so much to me knowing that you folks are here watching me live. If you got to watch it post, I understand everyone's busy. Hopefully you guys like this 8 o'clock time. Like I said, we're going to be doing it for the next little while. However, we are going to have to bounce back to 7 o'clock next week because of the Geeks and Co folks. They have responsibilities and they cannot be here from 8 to 9. So we will be here next week, 7 to 8, back like the original show. We're going to be talking about con crunching. We're going to talk about crunching and getting ready for Comic-Con. We're going to be talking about time management. You know, how do you manage being a cosplayer, being a podcaster, being a family person, being friends, being all these things that you have to do in life, plus all the stuff of being, you know, all this stuff. So we're going to talk about all that next week with JS and Messiah Complex Cosplay, also known as Aka. And yeah, we're going to talk all about that next week. But folks, thank you for joining tonight. It means the world to me. I hope you all have a great week. I will see you all next week for Monday Night Nerd. And yeah, we got a lot of fun stuff coming up. I can't wait for you guys to see the show while I'm away. It's going to be so fun. But that's for another date. Folks, have a great night. Have a great week. I love you all. I will see you all soon. Take care. See you soon. Hey, thanks for watching Monday Night Nerd. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the subscribe button, like this content, and follow on social media for even more nerdy fun. See you soon.